My parents promised me the family business, then tried giving it to my younger sister instead. Let's keep this channel alive. So hit that subscribe button while we get into this Reddit story. I grew up in a family that built everything from scratch. My parents started a small specialty foods company before I was even born, and by the time I was in middle school, the business had grown into something respectable. Nothing flashy, but solid. Loyal customers, local name recognition, and a reputation built on decades of hard work. I spent most weekends in the back office doing inventory with my dad or helping my mom organize the books. While other kids were playing video games or going to the mall, I was learning how to run a supply chain and manage vendor relationships. And I was fine with that, because from as early as I could remember, I was told, this will be yours someday. There was no ambiguity about it, no vague suggestion. My parents outright told me that the business would pass to me when they retired. I was the one who put in the hours, the one who went to business school instead of taking a gap year, the one who turned down internships in other cities just so I could keep working part-time at the family company. I sacrificed a lot. Relationships, friendships, even better-paying jobs that might have taken me further, because I believed them when they said I was the future of what they built. And then came my sister. She's 5 years younger than me and took a completely different path. She never showed any interest in the business. She was always chasing something new, fashion school for 1 semester, a failed blog, a personal coaching course that lasted 6 weeks, a stint as a yoga instructor. Nothing ever stuck, but my parents always bailed her out, paid off her debts, smoothed things over when she left landlords hanging or flaked on jobs. I didn't complain. I figured we all walk our own path, and mine had already been carved out in invoices and vendor deals. She wasn't a threat. She wasn't even in the picture, until she was. It started subtly. I'd overhear her on the phone with my mom, asking vague questions about how things work behind the scenes. Then she'd show up at the office not to help, but just to check things out. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured maybe she was finally trying to take responsibility for her life. It wasn't until my dad casually mentioned that we should all start thinking about what succession looks like that I started paying attention. Succession. That word hung in the air like a warning. Not transition. Not promotion. Succession. Like a competition. Like there were multiple candidates. Like I hadn't been the only one training for this my whole life. I sat down with my mom and asked her directly if anything had changed, if there was something I needed to know. She smiled, touched my hand, and said, "You'll always be part of this company." That was the first red flag. Not, "You'll run it." Not, "It's yours." Just part of it. Still, I told myself not to panic. Maybe they were just testing her interest. Maybe they thought having both of us involved would be a good idea. I didn't like it, but I wasn't going to start a war over a few awkward conversations. I figured my work, my consistency, my loyalty, that would speak louder than whatever charm offensive she was putting on. But then the real signs started showing. She started coming to meetings, not just sitting in the back, but speaking up, offering opinions, making comments that showed she'd been reviewing internal documents, things she shouldn't even have had access to. One day, I noticed she had her own company email address. No one told me about that. Another day, she showed up in branded apparel, the kind we reserved for full-time staff. When I brought it up to my dad, he just laughed and said, "It's good to have family involved." Family. Like I wasn't already the one holding everything together. The last straw came when one of our oldest vendors, a guy I'd worked with for over a decade, called me and asked if I was really stepping away. I asked what he meant. He said he'd spoken to my sister and she told him I was moving on to other projects and she'd be handling the next deal. I don't remember how I responded. I think I just said, "Thanks for letting me know," and hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time after that. Not angry, not even surprised, just done. They'd made their choice. They just hadn't told me yet. After that phone call, I stopped pretending. Not to them, not to myself. I'd been loyal, focused, and consistent for over a decade. I'd given up opportunities, burned bridges, and built my entire professional identity around a promise that was apparently never real. They had made a decision, they just hadn't said it out loud. And I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the knife to land. I'd seen enough boardroom betrayals in the business world to know how this played out. I wasn't going to be blindsided. I was going to get ahead of it. So I started collecting documents. Not maliciously, just for clarity. I had access to everything already: partnership agreements, vendor contracts, payroll records, ownership structures. I made copies. I reviewed the legal structure of the business and confirmed what I already suspected. My name wasn't on anything. All that talk about "this will all be yours" had never made it past verbal promises. Legally, I was just the salaried operations manager. I had no stake, no equity, no protection. But that didn't mean I didn't have leverage. Because while they were busy grooming my sister for a crown she hadn't earned, I was the one keeping everything from falling apart. I had built the relationships. I had negotiated the supply chain restructure that saved us six figures. I had rewritten our internal systems to prevent fraud and optimize the shipping workflows that kept us competitive. And no one, not even my sister, knew how to operate those systems without me. So I made a plan. Step one was to stop sharing everything I knew. No more over-explaining processes. No more training sessions with my sister. No more onboarding walkthroughs. I watched her fumble her way through tasks I used to smooth over, let mistakes happen that I would have normally fixed in the background. She started missing details. Customers got wrong invoices. Orders were delayed. I didn't sabotage anything, I just let things function at the level they would have without me, which was to say, barely at all. Step two was to quietly start building my exit. I updated my resume, reached out to professional contacts, scheduled coffees. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted something that matched my skill level and gave me room to grow, but I wasn't picky. I just needed a door to open, and within a few weeks, it did. A former client, now running a logistics firm, mentioned he was looking for someone to lead his operations. He'd seen what I'd done firsthand and offered me a generous package, more than what I was making at the family business. I accepted the offer and signed the paperwork without telling anyone. Then I went to work on step three, securing proof. Because while the business wasn't legally mine, I had a long history of written communication, emails, messages, and meeting notes where my parents had referred to me as the successor. Promises about transition timelines. Discussions about growth plans once the business is officially yours. It wasn't enforceable in court, but it was enough to make things uncomfortable if it ever came to that. I gathered it all, just in case. By this point, my parents had started acting strange. My mom kept trying to schedule one-on-one chats over coffee. My dad asked if I'd be available to show my sister the invoicing system just one more time. The vibe shifted from smug to nervous. I think they sensed something was coming, but they didn't know what. And then came the final push. At the quarterly board meeting, an informal gathering that usually included just the three of us, they dropped the news. They were bringing my sister on full-time as a co-director of operations. It wasn't phrased as a replacement, just a partnership, but they didn't ask for my input. They didn't even look at me while they said it. They just delivered it like it was inevitable, like I should have expected it, like my seat at the table had always been conditional. I sat through the meeting, nodded politely, took notes, and said nothing, because I'd already made my move. I resigned the following Monday. No drama, no big speech. I handed in a printed letter, thanked them for the opportunity, and told them I'd stay 2 more weeks to ensure a clean transition. I didn't say a word about the new job. I didn't offer to train anyone. I didn't volunteer documentation. They didn't ask. I think they were in shock. They just stared at me, my dad blinking like he hadn't heard me right, my mom trying to smile through it like maybe I was bluffing. But I wasn't. I was done. I spent those last 2 weeks doing exactly what I was paid to do, no more, no less. I answered questions when asked, followed procedures, completed the handover checklist. I didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped being the glue. I let people experience the gaps I'd been covering for years. The missing SOPs. The contacts that only returned my calls. The daily fires I'd quietly been putting out while they believed the business ran on its own. My sister tried to play it cool. She came in wearing new blazers, carrying a planner, walking fast like she was suddenly in charge of something. She started holding meetings, changing policies, making adjustments to systems she didn't fully understand. I watched her silently as she repeated half-truths she didn't know were outdated and gave instructions based on what she thought I did, not what I actually did. On my final day, there was no send-off, no cake, no card, not even a thank for everything. Just silence, like they wanted to pretend I was never essential in the first place. But I knew better, and so did they. I started my new job the next Monday. Day one felt like a breath of clean air. No family politics, no gaslighting, just real systems, real professionals, and a role that was defined, compensated, and respected. I wasn't someone's backup plan. I was there because I had earned it, and that made all the difference. The fallout came quickly. Less than 3 weeks after I left, I started getting messages from people at the old company. Some still use my number out of habit. A vendor called, asking why no one had responded to 3 emails. A client I'd personally onboard texted to say, "I miss working with you, things feel disorganized now." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The cracks were forming. My parents tried to hide it at first. They posted cheerful updates online. Photos of my sister stepping into her leadership era. Team meetings where no one looked relaxed. Vague captions about exciting changes at the company. But the tone started shifting. The photos got less frequent. The comments more awkward. A former employee I was still friends with told me they'd lost 2 major accounts. My sister had overpromised and underdelivered. She'd restructured the logistics side and caused massive delays. A key distributor was threatening to pull out. Then came the inevitable call. My dad. I didn't answer. He tried again the next day. Then my mom texted me, asking if I could hop on a call just to share some insights. I ignored that too. I had already shared everything they needed to know for the past 10 years. They chose to ignore it. They didn't get to ask for it now. A week later, I got a LinkedIn message from my sister. Hey, I know things got weird. I just wanted to say I never wanted to replace you. I was just doing what mom and dad asked. I'm really struggling. If you have time to talk, I'd appreciate your help. I read it 3 times. Then I archived it. No response. Because here's the thing, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had already moved on. But I wasn't going to be the person who fixed their mess after they pushed me out. I wasn't going to carry the weight for people who saw me as disposable the moment it became convenient. I'd earned everything they gave away. And now they were learning what it actually cost to replace me. Months passed. The messages stopped. The social media posts slowed to a trickle, and when they did come, they looked more strained. Photos of meetings with fewer attendees. Captions that felt performative. Thin smiles under harsh lighting. I didn't check often, but people still sent me screenshots. Old employees I'd trained. Vendors I'd built relationships with. They didn't say much, just the occasional thought you'd want to see this. Always accompanied by a silent acknowledgement of how fast the place was crumbling without me. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't watching gleefully from a distance, waiting for them to fall. I just wasn't surprised. Because deep down, I always knew the business didn't run on legacy. It didn't run on names. It ran on systems, relationships, consistency, me. But my parents never saw that. Or maybe they did, and they just assumed I'd never leave. That I'd always be there to carry the load. That they could hand my seat to someone else and I'd stick around to hold it up anyway. They were wrong. I had my own life now. A job where I was valued. A team that respected my time. Managers who listened when I spoke. I worked less, earned more, and finally had space to breathe. No more late-night texts asking me to rewrite something my sister had broken. No more weekly strategy meetings where my ideas were considered and then rebranded under someone else's name. No more hoping for recognition from people who were only ever comfortable as long as I stayed quiet. About 6 months after I left, the family business put out a public statement. Something vague and corporate sounding about leadership restructuring and strategic downsizing. The comments were brutal. Loyal customers asking what happened to their orders. Former clients complaining about canceled contracts. A few brave voices even asking where I had gone. I didn't reply to any of them. I just watched it quietly, knowing they were living in the reality they built. A few weeks later, my dad called again. I didn't answer. Then my mom emailed. She said they were considering selling the business. That things hadn't worked out the way they'd hoped. That they wanted to have a conversation if I was open to it. She said they still saw me as family and hoped I'd consider coming home. I sat with that email for a long time. Not because I was tempted, not because some part of me missed them, but because it made me realize just how far removed they were from reality. They were still trying to dress it up like I had left in anger, like I'd stormed out in a tantrum, like this whole thing was a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a polite conversation over coffee. But I didn't leave out of emotion. I left out of calculation, out of necessity, out of respect for myself. They hadn't pushed me away by accident. They had systematically erased me one meeting at a time, one decision at a time, one slide at a time, until I was no longer a partner, just an employee. And when I finally acted accordingly, it shocked them. What they wanted now wasn't reconciliation. It was maintenance. They needed someone to come back and hold the business together while they regrouped. They wanted the version of me that stayed silent, that did the work and asked for nothing, that cleaned up after mistakes and didn't claim credit, that sat at the back of the table while my sister sat at the front. They didn't want me. They wanted my utility, my functionality, my reliability, but not my voice, not my presence. So no, I didn't respond. I didn't write a polite rejection. I didn't ask them what took them so long. I didn't list the years I gave up or the respect I never got. I just deleted it. Because once you've seen people for who they really are, you can't go back to pretending they're anything else. There's no going back to a place that never truly saw you. No fixing a structure built on the assumption that loyalty equals silence. No coming home when home was the first place to betray you. My sister hasn't reached out since. She probably doesn't know about the email, or maybe she does, and just didn't care enough to follow up. Last I heard, she'd taken a job out of state, some consulting gig she wasn't qualified for, arranged by a college friend of hers who owed a favor. She always did land on her feet, at least temporarily. Maybe she'll stick it out this time. Maybe she won't. Maybe she'll finally understand that charm doesn't cover for incompetence forever. Or maybe she won't, and someone else will have to carry the fallout. Either way, it's not my concern anymore. I wish her well from a distance, but we're not the same. And we never were. Because while I was building the foundation, she was waiting for the ribbon cutting. While I was staying up late to rework our logistics platform after a system crash, she was rehearsing her new title. While I was meeting with vendors to renegotiate contracts and save the company six figures, she was posting inspirational quotes on the company Instagram and calling it brand development. They wanted her because she looked like leadership. They kept me because I acted like it. And now she's gone, and I'm not coming back. My parents still run what's left of the business, just the two of them now, part-time, with what remains of a staff that was once strong. They scaled back hard. The expansions were halted. The big event contracts dried up. Most of the partnerships I built slowly faded. The processes I created were never updated, and the cracks I used to quietly patch up turned into full-on gaps. They're back to what it was 20 years ago, barely sustainable. Not because they weren't capable, but because they assumed the engine would keep running even if they yanked out the fuel. They never realized the difference between ownership and leadership. They had the paperwork. I had the execution. They had the dream. I had the structure that made it real. And now they're learning what happens when the person you depended on decides not to be dependent on anymore. There's no one answering the phones at 10 p.m. anymore. No one skipping holidays to finish the quarterly reports. No one walking into the warehouse at 5 a.m. to load trucks when someone calls out sick. Just the two of them trying to keep it all upright, wondering when it started slipping. They made their choice, and I made mine. Sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. Just silence and success.